maybe I'm down under 10 bucks a time. But now the problem is every additional day just barely slices something off that. Like, it's barely worth it. You know, if I bite today, it's only going to take 4 cents off the cost. What? Wait, we're tape. I was talking about the last show, which I've dropped off. It's amazing. We got a show edited in a month. So kudos to that editor guy. He's a freaking genius, is my thought. Tonight topics. Look, I printed 4 pages, although page 3 is kind of empty because I ran out of things. As usual, the last item is origami, which offer still stands. If I get to origami, I will eat this next blank piece of paper, which is not technically origami. I guess it's kind of the opposite of origami because the paper's then not worth anything. But we're not getting to origami, so, you know, write your relatives. I was there when Keith didn't get to origami again. It's an unusual show tonight. You may notice things are not quite as polished as you're, you know, accustomed to for the average Keith Explains show. You may notice in particular I don't always look at the cameras in the same way, and the problem is my floor director is slightly shorter than my normal floor director. John, my normal floor director, has decided to take a vacation, and so I have a fill-in, a great floor director, just slightly smaller, and so that means the perspective, as I see her, you know, she's got to jump a little bit higher and wave, because it's really dark in this studio, and there are a lot of bright lights shining at me, and so she's got to jump higher to get my attention to point at the next camera. So if it's entirely my fault if I don't look at cameras correctly. And since John is on vacation, we didn't get, well, John's an interesting guy. John's our floor director, and before the show, John has a clipboard for the show. I don't know where John got the clipboard for the show from. He just showed up with a clipboard one day, and on the clipboard were the things John would say before the show. And he has this little spiel, and he reads it off every time. And we all know what is written on the clipboard because we've heard it multiple times. But he still reads it each time with the same meter to his voice as he recites it. John also has this crew badge, which he wears about his neck. And it says Keith Explains Crew, and it's got a picture of John, and it says John. I don't know where John got the Keith Explains Crew badge. I have never made badges for the crew. It never occurred to me we needed badges. We all know each other, and there is no security, you know, who would presumably look at the badges and decide if you were allowed in or not. I don't have a stalker that I know of. I mean, it would be vaguely cool if I did, because it means someone was actually watching the show and cared enough to want to kill me. But John has so John's on vacation. And John invited me to go on vacation with him, and I said, "What are you doing, John?" He said, I'm taking 3 weeks off. I'm going to drive around and see America. And I thought, oh, what parts? And he said, all of it. Now, 3 weeks is, I guess 3 weeks is kind of a long time. And so I said, really, you're going to see all of it? And he said, well, I'm also going to Canada. Because apparently in John's mind, 3 weeks is far too long to waste on America alone. So he intends to spend half of that time in Canada. So that's like, you know, 10 or 11 days he's going to see all of America. And then he's going to Canada. Now, John's from Canada, so I can see why he might want to spend a day or two longer in Canada than normal. But if you look at Canada on the map, it looks very large. And if you actually go to Canada, you realize most of it is empty. And therefore, there is no reason to go to those parts of Canada. So John's like, yeah, it's great. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to drive like 8 or 10 hours a day, and I'll see things. And I'm like, well, you'll see roads. He's like, no, I'll stop and see things. I'm like, I don't think you really will have much time for stopping if you're driving 8 or 10 hours a day. He's like, yeah, I'll stop at the ends, and maybe I'll have lunch. I'm like, okay. And he's like, it'll be great. You should come. And I'm like, no. No, for God's sakes, no. I'm not sitting in a car for 10 hours a day. And we have gotten updates from John on Facebook about his vacation. Little things like he's like, it's great. I'm driving 12 hours a day. And I had lunch in a McDonald's in Arizona. And I'm like, I bet it looked just like a McDonald's here, except sandier. And he posts little pictures to his Facebook, and I have looked at the pictures, and they are not bad. He has been to places. The one thing that I was surprised at is I had assumed that with him driving 12 hours a day, that the pictures would be blurry. Because he couldn't possibly be stopping to look at anything. So he would merely, hold the camera near the window as he drove past whatever the site of interest today was to post it to his Facebook. But I guess he stops briefly to see things, and I don't know how. And he's like, it's great, I'm on vacation. And I'm like, no, you're a long-distance trucker without a load. Is what you are. I mean, if you're going to drive 12 hours a day, you may as well get people to pay you to carry things, because that's pretty much what you're doing. Is you're carrying the stuff in your trunk across America, and that stuff could have just stayed here for all we know. That's John's vacation. I'm not on it, thankfully, because, again, 12 hours in the car. Now, I have had some kind of vacation-y thingies of my own lately. I went to Lake Tahoe twice in the last 2.5 weeks. I lived in California for 20 years, and I have never been to Lake Tahoe, I think. It's possible that I stopped briefly in Lake Tahoe once, like 18 years ago, when we went on this one off-site at Apple, where we eventually went to Reno. We may have stopped in South Lake Tahoe. I don't remember, because I don't remember. It's 18 years ago, for God's sakes, and as I recall, I may have been a little bit drunk. I do recall that when we got to Reno, I had never been to a casino before because I'm from Wisconsin. We don't have casinos in Wisconsin that I know of. We got to the casino, and Apple gave us all $100 to gamble. That was dumb, because that really meant we were all just giving the casino $100, because none of us knew how to gamble. But I knew how to play blackjack because I had played it on my Atari 2600. And I recall being somewhat good at it, by which I mean I didn't hear the bad things happened buzzer quite as often as I heard the, hey, you won money buzzer. I can recall spending days of my life playing blackjack on an Atari 2600 with the crappiest possible graphics and just loving it. So I sat at the blackjack table, 18 years ago in Tahoe, and I put down my $100, and they gave me, and I think I played, $1 blackjack. And then some woman came by and said, would you like a drink? And I said, no, thank you. And then she asked, the guy I worked with next to me, would you like a drink? And he's like, yeah, can I get a 7 and 7? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then she goes away, and she comes back, and she gives him a drink. And I recall thinking, wait, he didn't pay for that drink. And I said, she forgot to charge you. After she had left, I didn't want to tip her off. And he said, oh, you don't pay for drinks here. They just bring them to you. And suddenly I realized why people go to Reno to gamble. And then the next time she came by and said, would you like a drink? I said, yes. Can I get a screwdriver? And then she brought me one. And I'm pretty sure that I had more than $100 worth of alcohol that day. Because, again, the more drinks you get in me, the worse blackjack I play. But on the all, I think I held my own. Anyway, I got onto that story from the story of Tahoe, which, as I mentioned, I went to Tahoe twice. For some reason, within 2 weeks, I'd never been there before. suddenly two distinct conferences, both, got set in Lake Tahoe, and I had to go to them a week and a day apart. So it's not like I could go to Tahoe and then just stay there for a day or two and wait for the next conference. No, I had to drive to Tahoe, go to this conference, drive home, wait a week, go back to work, et cetera, and then drive back to Tahoe. So I am somewhat familiar with driving to Tahoe now. The route you take and it was weird, like the second time I was driving there, I was like, oh yeah, this part, I hate this part. I'm like, I've been on this part exactly once before in my life. How much could I hate it? But it turns out a lot, because there was construction and traffic and people, so I really hated it. I went to Tahoe for 2 different conferences. The first one was an American Planning Association conference. I'm not going to mention why, but I'm kind of a bigwig in some city in the South Bay, by which I mean I'm no one of any importance whatsoever, but I did have a reason to go to an American Planning Association conference. So I went and learned about city planning and things like that. And I went to a bunch of sessions and I learned really interesting things, like San Francisco has these amazing plans for dealing with traffic and encouraging development. And I went to this thing where these 3 women from Los Angeles talked about how they were redeveloping this 40 by 30 block area, which was currently, it used to be a ranch. And then it kind of got, some housing and some low, 1 and 2 floor buildings. And they were looking to develop it to a new downtown. And they had these plans and pictures. And here's what's going to happen this year. And 5 years later, this is going to happen. And I thought, when I go to my meetings, mostly we talk about stoplights. And not stoplights in plural. We'll talk about like one particular, like, oh, if we build this, we're going to get 17 too many cars at this stoplight. Whatever will we do? I'm like, we don't get to talk about redeveloping 20 by 30 block areas over the next 40 years. We talk about things like, oh, I don't want him to have that 2-story house because it'll hurt my dog. I've never heard hurt my dog, but I expect it one of these days. It was an interesting conference. I'm really not in that field much, so I spent most of the conference thinking, these people are using a whole different language than the one I have, and I'm just struggling to keep up and to try to think about why. How would I possibly apply this to what I need to do? And a lot of it, no, I'm not going to. Anyway, at the end of that, 3 days later, I got in my car, I drove back home. It's 4 hours to Tahoe, about 4 hours back from where I live. So that's 8 hours in the car. And each time I got out of my car, I thought, man, does my behind hurt from having sat in this car for 4 hours a day, which is why there was no way I was getting in a car with Vink to drive 12 hours a day and point at scenic things as they went past. Oh, look, the Liberty Bell. Oh, look, it's Gettysburg. That's my assumption of how John's road trip went. Perhaps he's driving vastly in excess of the speed limit so that he actually has time at each stop, but I doubt it. And then, as I mentioned, I had to go back to Tahoe a second time a couple days later, a week later, for a totally different meeting, had nothing to do with it, but they were like exactly the same hotel and everything. So I get back and they're like, are you checking in, Mr. Statenfield? And I'm like, yes, I am. And they're like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, and here's a room key. I forgot to drop it off last time I stayed here. So now suddenly they think I've been here a lot. And they're like, well, welcome back. And I'm like, okay. We did find some nice things. The second time we had dinner on a boat there. Lake Tahoe has a lake. I think you should have known that. But interestingly, that first conference I went to, I never actually got to see the lake because I kind of got there at dark on the first day, and the conference was at the hotel, and the hotel is far away from the lake, and we never had any reason to leave the hotel except, until the last day, and then we had to drive home And so we didn't go anywhere near the lake. So like after I got back, people were like, how was the lake? And I'm like, I hear it was nice. I'm like, didn't you go see it? I'm like, no, why would I go to Lake Tahoe to see the lake, for God's sakes? That's just stupid. I mean, I can see a lake anywhere. I didn't say that. Because you can't really see a lake anywhere. I mean, there aren't that many lakes. There are ponds. Maybe there, I don't know, pond there. What else did we see? Well, we saw bats when we were in Lake Tahoe, and I thought, oh, cool, bats flying around outside. Look, it's around dinner time, there are bats. And then I thought, some people don't like bats. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about bats out loud. Maybe it's going to freak people out, but it didn't, I was pleased to say. We did have a conversation with someone like, we have a bat house. And she's like, oh, do you have bats? I'm like, no. We just have a bat house. She's like, well, why do you have a bat house if you don't have any bats? And I'm like, it's the Bay Area. Bats can't afford to live there. I mean, I'd like to get some bats, but, you know, we need some kind of federal funding to help them buy the place. Because bats pretty much make nothing. I mean, they eat bugs. There's no money in eating bugs. And the South Bay is very expensive. Anyway, so as I mentioned, I drove 16 plus hours in a week and a half and, you know, put 1,000 miles on my car. When normally I put like 8,000 miles on my car a year. And so the fact that I put like, you know, 1,000 miles on my car, not 1,000, 600 miles on my car in like a week is just going to totally screw up my insurance agent's idea of how much I'm driving. Because every time I go to get insurance, he's like, how many miles do you drive? And I'm like, well, like 6,000 or 8,000 a year. And he's like, really? Don't you go anywhere? And I'm like, no, I don't. Why would I go anywhere? This is where I live. He's like, well, you know, on vacation. I'm like, well, I would fly if I were going somewhere on vacation most times. Because if you drive, you get there and your butt hurts. Whereas if you fly, you're so uncomfortable on that plane that your butt barely stands out. You know, you kind of get off the plane, you're like, my entire body hurts, and I have a cold because you were injecting viruses into my nose for 4 hours. But here's some observations about driving in the So we're driving there, and apparently the second time we drove up, there was some big motorcycle thing in the area, because there were motorcycles all over the place. And here's something I have to say to you motorcycle people. For God's sakes, buy mufflers. Big mufflers, because I am tired of being deafened every time you decide to blow by me at 75 miles an hour while I'm sitting in traffic, angry. And then I'm like, you know, loud pipes save lives. We need to have our motorcycles loud so you can hear us. That keeps us safe. And I'm like, how about not weaving in and out of traffic at 70 miles an hour when we're doing 30? That would keep you safe too, and then you wouldn't be zooming by my head with the loud, headache-inducing motorcycle noise. And when we came back the second time, we had a little more time. It was a Sunday. I didn't have to be back for any time in particular. So I thought, let's take the scenic way back. I've already driven back on 80 once. I know what it looks like. I'm a professional. I'm a pro. I've done this before. Let's drive back the back ways. We can see California. We saw a lot of California because there was a lot of traffic on the back ways, because apparently everyone thought we'll drive back on the back ways. And it also occurred to me, people are like, well, that must have been nice. You must have seen a lot of things. I'm like, no, I was driving. I saw the road in front of me. And the car, and the car, and the car, and the car, and there were these cars over here, and there were these cars behind me, which I had to constantly focus on because I was driving. Suppose if I'd been the passenger, I could have seen more of it. Although I'm not sure you could, because with the windy roads and stuff, you get seasick. Car sick, windy road sick, Tahoe sick, whatever sick. So, you know, 4 hours. Didn't take us 4 hours to drive back. Took us 8 hours to drive back. And there are 3 reasons it took us 8 hours to drive back. Reason number 1, I've somewhat mentioned, it's the traffic. In particular, I blame 3 traffic lights in Placerville, which I have now decided to dedicate my life to removing. Because those 3 traffic lights in Placerville, perfectly normal traffic lights on Highway 50, managed to back traffic up for an hour into the hills. We're like coming down out of the hills and we're like, oh, look, there's a tiny bit of stoppage ahead of us. Oh, so maybe someone is stopping because there's a deer crossing the road. No. They're stopping because the car in front of them has stopped. And that car stopped because the car in front of them has stopped. And that car stopped because 9 miles ahead of them, there's a traffic light, which has decided to go red because some moron wants to get from one side of the road to the other side of the road. Because he lives in Placerville and he wants to go to Walmart or something. It made me very angry. And I thought, why can't we get rid of these 3 traffic lights? Sure, it would make things suck a little bit more if you lived in Placerville, but you live in Placerville. How much more could it suck for you? Another hour of our trip back happened because of squished pennies. I mentioned the squished pennies before. Technically, they're elongated pennies. My girlfriend collects squished pennies. You know, like you go to Disneyland and there's a machine you can put a penny in and then you can pull a lever and it'll squish it. And you're like, oh, that's not bad, that's a penny. Except you also had to put like 75 cents of quarters in, real money, like 75 cents of quarters, and the penny, and the quarters don't come back. And the penny does come back, but it's been squished, and it doesn't look like a penny anymore, and it's got a little design on it. And then after you've got the penny with a little design, you put it in a little bag and never look at it again. There were 2 penny squishing machines in the Tahoe area. Pretty much 180 degrees in the opposite side of the lake of where we were staying. So we were pretty much guaranteed that we would have to drive out of our way to get to the penny squishing machines, which we did. And we got to the penny squishing machines and we parked the car and we got out. And then again, quarter, 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 penny. 15 seconds later, we got a squished penny. And then as I recall, there were designs. So you got to get one of each design, for God's sakes. I mean, why would we come this far and only get 1 squished penny if the machine can make 3? So then it's quarter, 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 penny. Quarter, 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 penny. Okay, let's go. So that was like another extra hour of the drive to get the 6 or 7 squished pennies for the bag. And then, I don't even remember why the rest of the time was. I mean, there was the traffic there. I guess it was longer because it was through the hills and wavy. And I recall briefly as I was driving thinking, some guy came through here, you know, with one of the little surveyor things and went, we'll build the road here. And then God knows how many millions of dollars later we had a road there. Why couldn't he have thought to make it straight? And I'm sure that he's like, well, this way follows the topology better and blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, if you had just been willing to use a little more fill, maybe you could have made a straight road. And then maybe we could have put in an overpass around the Placerville area. Here's something else funny. So we get to this hotel in, you know, Lake Tahoe area, the Squaw Valley Resort. And it's a nice hotel room, but it is kind of high-endy. You know, I'm somewhat accustomed to the Motel 6, and this one had like a bedroom and then a room with a couch, and there was a door between them. It's like a suite. I'm like, okay. And it had a kitchen with a tiny little dishwasher. I'm like, okay. Tiny little dishwasher, and it had a fireplace. And I thought, great, a fireplace. Except they're concerned about air quality in Tahoe. So there's a big piece of glass in front of the fireplace. You can't actually put wood in it to burn. It's a gas fireplace with a big thick piece of glass in front of it. And we're like, I wonder how you turn the gas fireplace on. And it took us a while to figure it out, but it turns out there's just a switch on the wall. Looks like a light switch. You hit the light switch, the fireplace comes on. You hit the light switch, the fireplace goes off. It totally ruins everything nice about a fireplace when it's essentially the equivalent of a slow incandescent light bulb. Takes all the romance and joy out of it. You can't sit in front of a fire that you turn down with a switch. Oh, and we saw a bear while we were there. We're driving back one night after dinner, and we're like, what's that big black moving bear? Bear. And then in my brain I thought, oh cool, a bear. Well, the back part of my brain, the reptile part, went, you know, bears eat people. And then Loretta said, let's take a picture of the bear. And I thought, oh great. Bears love having sudden flashing lights. I think that's what makes them attack, in fact. And then I thought, I wonder if my car is bear-proof. And then I recall reading all those things about how bears get into cars for candy bars, and I went, my car is not bear-proof at all. And I'm really just a big candy bar. To the bear's perspective, but we couldn't get our camera out in time, and when we finally got a picture of the bear, it was gone. And then we kept telling people, we saw a bear, and they went, really? You don't see many bears around here. And I'm like, it's our first day here, really? I got like a minute left. I'm going to totally skip that. I'm going to skip that. Home repair. I've talked about home repair before, but I'm going to conclude home repair. As you know, I painted the bedroom, and as part of painting the bedroom, I had to take everything off the walls, like the flat screen TV, and then put it all back. I've had a flat screen TV for a couple of years in my house, and attached to the flat screen TV, we have a DVD player. And the DVD player has cords, and the cords hang down from behind the TV to where we would put the DVD player. And this bothered me, because it looked wrong. It wasn't wrong, of course, it was just a little cord hanging on the wall, but I spent so much freaking time trying to find a way. First, I had to investigate DVD players to find one that was thin enough that I could put on the wall behind the TV, and then I had to get cords, and I had to order special cords that'd be short enough that they wouldn't hang down, and I had to cut a special hole in the wall and run an electrical outlet there so that I wouldn't see the electrical cord, and I did all of that, and I finally got it set up, and then like a week later I went, well, gee, why didn't I put the Apple TV behind the TV? And then I had the whole same problem. How am I going to mount the Apple TV? It was amazingly involved. I paid, you know, $150 for an Apple TV, and then I paid $50 more for a little piece of plastic to let me attach the Apple TV to the wall in a flat fashion. I think they're telling me I'm out of time. I can't really see. It's very ungodly dark out there, as I mentioned. But see, I think that's the case. We'll see you next month, everyone. Thank you for watching. And again, no origami, so this piece of paper can live.